Here at home, inflation sticker shock is hitting millions of Americans hard.
Inflation in the U.S. is the highest it's been in 4 decades.
Driving inflation.
Inflation.
Hyperinflation.
Turn on the news and you'll hear it. Inflation hitting every sector of the economy.
Instead of 3 gallons of milk, we get 1.
But what is inflation? And more importantly, how did we get here?
Inflation is made in Washington because only Washington can create money. What produces it is too much government spending and too much government creation of money and nothing else.
Inflation boils down to the expansion of the supply of money and credit. The government and mainstream media have tried to redefine inflation to just mean rising prices, finding all sorts of scapegoats. But it's the government that creates inflation, and rising costs are just one of the results, placing a heavy tax on the working class.
I think in 2021, our central bank let us down quite badly. It was confidently dismissing concerns about inflation as transitory.
From President Biden to Fed Chair Jerome Powell, American leaders say inflation is their #1 priority. In order to tame it, we've seen hiking interest rates amid record debt levels and attempts at destroying demand without initiating a deflationary bust. But in June, the CPI in the U.S. that was supposed to be transitory hit a new high of 9.1%. So when will inflation finally cool? Or will we see stagflation for months or years to come?
Inflation numbers in 21, which we will see rising, are of a temporary nature.
That was European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde speaking just a year ago about global inflation numbers. Today, inflation in Europe has hit record levels, prompting what's supposed to be the first interest rate hike in the Eurozone in a decade.
If you simply print lots of money at a time when you're producing less, you've got a classic case of too much money chasing too few goods, and the result of that is inflation.
The last 2 years have been a perfect storm of inflationary chaos sparked by pandemic lockdowns that crunch supply chains and central bank monetary policy of printing on overdrive. As you zoom out to other countries around the world, to emerging markets and developing nations dependent on the dollar, inflation numbers are even more staggering, prompting civil unrest as the cost of living becomes unsustainable.
What you're seeing is that the inflation isn't just this U.S. phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon.
You can see it with all central banks, that they're now worried about inflation when they weren't before.
This is Sri Lanka. Similar scenes playing out in Peru, Greece, Sudan, Argentina, Lebanon, Pakistan, and elsewhere as people around the world are reacting to the shockwaves of skyrocketing food, shelter, and gas prices, of basic necessities that are now growing scarce in a world of abundant money.
You should be asking yourself the question, what do we think is going on here? If we keep printing money at this rate, what will happen?
This is what happens in a world of easy money. But there are many who argue Bitcoin could do quite a bit to fix this.
How is inflation congruent with humanity thriving in a technology-driven world? Bitcoin is the most hopeful path.
So the whole question was, how hard is Bitcoin? How is it going to hold up in the long term as commodity money? And so the longer it goes, the more of its properties you understand, it's doing quite well.
And when times are growing harder, many are looking to a new form of hard money for a digital world to usher in a parallel system free of the chains of inflation.
When the currency is expanding at 5% a year, it's kind of a nuisance. When you go to Argentina or Turkey and it's expanding at 50% a year, it's a life or death situation.